The following program sponsored by Adams Financial Concepts.
About money, a different approach to investing you won't hear anywhere else. Your host, Mike Adams, is a registered investment advisor and works with investment portfolios exceeding over $100,000 in net worth, and has a proven track record of managing long-term investments surpassing the markets in the long term. The information shared on the following program is for educational purposes only, and any investment advice given may not be suitable for all investors. And now, here's Mike.
Corrections. Talking about, I predicted a correction. You know what? It's kind of like the weather. Really, it's kind of like the weather. You know, you can say that it's going to snow in Seattle someday. It's going to snow in Puyallup someday. It's going to rain in Puyallup someday. It's going to sunshine in Puyallup someday. Just as long as you know it's off in the future sometime. In 20 of the last 36 years, there's been a correction. 20 of the last 36 calendar years. And if you look in the last 5 years, there hasn't been any corrections. So if you look at 31 years, you have 2 out of every 3 years you've had a correction. But the correction's very special this time because what we've been is in what's a kids market. And as I watch the parents and the kids walk up and down, it reminds me, we're in what's called a kids market. Adam Smith wrote a book called The Money Game. And during that time, that was written about the 1960s, Adam Smith talked about the money game. He talked about the kids market at that time. I think we're living in a kids market again today. Over half the managers of mutual funds are under the age of 30. Over half of mutual fund managers are under the age of 30, which means they did not go through 2008, 2009. Some of them were in high school. Some of them were in college. Some of them had not even made it that far. And they're managing mutual funds they've never experienced. They've only seen it and have an academic understanding. There's a huge difference of feeling and knowing what it's like to see your neighbors losing their house, to see people losing their jobs. 1 out of 10 people lost their job during that time. It was a very difficult time. People were underwater in their houses. People looked around and didn't know if they were going to lose their job, even if their job looked secure. That's a time, academically, you can look at it, but to actually experience it, those kids haven't experienced it. They're experiencing their first correction since they become mutual fund managers. And for them, it's a really fearful time. Yesterday, I talked on the radio about an article that came out of the Financial Advisor magazine. They mentioned preparation for hurricanes. Hurricanes in Florida. The author of the article lived in Florida, and they'd gone through a couple hurricanes, and they talked about the to-do list to get ready for a hurricane. What do you do for a hurricane? What do you do to get prepared? They had 2 lists. And of course, the first list was you need to buy batteries, you need to listen to the Weather Channel, you need to get your emergency kit, you need to get your evacuation kit, you need to lay in plans for what you do in terms of a hurricane. and buy those extra things. But the second list, the second list was prepared by those people that had already been through a hurricane. They talked about buy vodka, prepare for a hurricane party, buy more vodka, speculate as to whether we're going to have to go to work on Monday. That was the preparation for the hurricane. That was the second list, because they'd already gone through it. Because unreality was reality. The intangible had become intangible. The unimaginable was imaginable. They'd already been through it. So what we're going through now, this roller coaster time, this time of up and downs, for the kids, these young people that are managing mutual funds, they're experiencing for the first time a correction. The corrections are very terrifying times. If you've never gone through a correction, if you've never gone through a bear market, you look and you think things go down, you want them to go back up. Things that you thought were very good investments suddenly are falling all apart. It's a terrifying time the first time you go through. Once you've been through it 3 or 4 or 5, 6 times, you know that it's going to be okay. You just have to wait it out. You just have to sit there and know that things are going to come around. It's just a normal part of going through the process. Either you're going to be in a situation where things go to zero, and it doesn't matter what you own at that point, or things are going to recover and come back up. And I've been talking for a number of years about the super cycle, and I talk about that again. We're in a time when we're probably in the greatest bull market of our lifetime. And if you're not prepared for it, if you're not involved in it, you're going to miss it. But the kid market, this is their first time through a correction. And what we're seeing is the terrifying roller coaster effect. If you drop and look at the market on a long-term basis, it looks like a straight line from the lower left-hand corner to the upper right-hand corner. That's a straight line. But if you look at it up close, it looks like a roller coaster with a big dip. You're climbing. You suddenly reach a top, and then you come crashing down. That's the way it looks with a roller coaster. That's how it looks. That's how a correction looks. That's where we are. That's what's been going on. That's where we are. And that's part of what we're seeing today in the market. And with that, as I look around and look at the fair, I'm looking at people that are eating corn dogs. I'm looking at people that are enjoying the food and ice cream. You know one thing about ice cream? Ice cream sells much more in the summertime than the wintertime. Isn't that a surprise? So when I got my first professional summer job, it was for Pacific Gas and Electric out of San Francisco. That was my first professional job. And I was a mathematician undergraduate, and so I went into their operations research department. And forecasting electrical energy is a really important part of what utilities do, electric utilities. Because in that forecasting, if you forecast need too much power, you're going to spend a lot of money that you don't have to. And if you're too late in building power plants, you're going to brown out. So forecasting electrical consumption for the next 20 or 30 years is a really important thing for an electric utility. And so as I went into the operations research department, it was something new. Computers were in. Computers were just coming. There were these huge, massive computers. You know, today I have a phone that has as much computing power as those computers did in those days. But that was a huge computer. You did punch cards, and you fed punch cards into the computer, and you wrote your own computer programs. Those things were the way in which we moved. And we were trying to forecast. The old way of forecasting was to take out the book from last year, count the number of dividers, put in the same number of dividers for this year, and then go through the same mechanical hand forecasting. But we were doing things in a different way. We were programming things into the computer. We were using a program called linear regression. A lot of people are familiar with correlations. That's where correlations come from, is a linear regression, or sometimes you have other correlations as well, but primarily around linear regression. And, you know, to be thorough, We were throwing every variable we could think of into the mix and testing it against electrical power consumption. Do you know the surprising thing? We found one that was almost a perfect fit. Almost a perfect fit. It was something that you could look at and you could forecast electrical power consumption. Amazing, isn't it? All you had to do is look at this one variable and you could forecast electrical power consumption. But what's even more amazing was it was the number of prisoners on Alcatraz. Had nothing to do with electrical power consumption, and if that was true today, there would be no electrical power consumption in Northern California because there's no prisoners on Alcatraz. And what I learned from that is the same thing we started talking about with ice cream. You sell more ice cream in the summertime than in the wintertime because there's a relationship between the two, between the consumption of ice cream and between the weather. People eat more ice cream during warm weather than cold weather. The same is true in running correlations. Unfortunately, a lot of correlations that are run in my industry, people don't figure out if there's a causal relationship or not. They just look at the relationship between a couple variables. So that is an important aspect of where we are. Now we're coming up to a break, so don't go away. Stick around. And this has been part of Sirius. I mean, Julie was here. She had a lot of gas.
Our returns in a moment with Mike Adams here on Business Radio 1300 KKOL. For more information, click on adamsfinancialconcepts.com.
Lots of people manage investment portfolios. Just a few can manage a successful portfolio and provide exceedingly great service to their clients. Here's Mike Adams from Adams Financial Concepts.
We believe the price you pay should be based on the performance of your portfolio and the quality of service you receive.
You know, Mike, it seems that a lot of companies subscribe to the one-size-fits-all mentality of investing. Does one size really fit all?
Not with us. Every portfolio that we manage is customized to fit each particular client's objectives and risk tolerance. We place our client's interests first in all portfolio decisions.
If you're looking for a home for your seven-figure plus investment portfolio, call Mike Adams of Adams Financial Concepts, specializing in creating and maintaining wealth for over 20 years. 206-903-1019. That's 206-903-1019. Or log on to adamsfinancialconcepts.com.
Yeah. And we're back here at the Puyallup Fair. Here on 1590 and 1300. 1590 Freedom Radio and 1300 the Business Radio. So you're hearing it on both programs. And while you were listening to commercial, the song that was playing here was Bob Dylan's The Times They Are A-Changin'. Certainly, in a lot of the world, the times are a-changing. But if you look around the Puyallup Fair has been going since 1903 or thereabouts, over 100 years. The changes aren't all that great. We're still seeing the state fair. We're still seeing the animals. We're still seeing the crowds of people. Food to eat. And the food's changed a little bit, of course. Some of the things you can buy has changed. But it's like old times. It's stepping back into the past. It is the Americana. It is Main Street. And it is here that you get to see and experience some of the great times of American history. This is what it was like. It was more difficult to travel in the past times. It would take a week or 10 days to get from one coast to the other. This is where life centered, in the granges, in the fairs, in the markets. That was Americana a few years ago. Now we think nothing of getting on a plane and flying to Paris or to London or to Bangkok or Beijing. Fly around the world. See, experience all those things. But there was a time when this was what people experienced. This was one of the great times of the year. And still, you can come here, be at the fair, and experience what it was like. It's a great time. Corn dogs, ice cream. Of course I had a corn dog when I was here. I had ice cream too. You can come here, you can get the most gigantic hamburger I've ever seen. It's amazing. I'm not sure it's healthy, but it sure is nice. You see the French fries, and they're not just a few. They're a bundle of French fries. And you can walk through the exhibits, you can see all sorts of exhibits. Home peelers, you see all the exhibits that are going on at the fair. You know, it's an old time. But as that song said, the times, they are a-changing. You know, I build portfolios, my client portfolios around it, because the times really are changing. The world's changing. You know, by the year 2030, they expect that 93% of the world's middle class will be in emerging nations. Already, China has a bigger world middle class than the United States' entire population. And by middle class, there's a wide variety. What we mean by middle class is essentially people that are not living at subsistence, but they're actually buying products. They can go out and they can buy our lattes, they can buy shirts, they can buy food at a grocery store. But 93% of the world's middle class is going to live in those emerging nations, not in Europe, not in America, not in Canada, in those emerging nations. The Russias, the Brazils, the Indias, the Chinas, the Thailand, and the African nations. That's where they're going to be from. And those people are going to be consuming products. You know that of U.S. companies, half of their revenues, half of their sales come from overseas. We have a significant amount of revenues that come from overseas. And while we talk about exports, and we're not a huge export nation, it's American companies that are opening factories, that are opening businesses, that are opening coffee shops, that are opening manufacturing facilities overseas. Half their revenues they're selling over there. Half outside the United States. We've become world dependent. So it was not too long ago that China devalued their currency, and the Chinese economy slowed, and that had an impact on Wall Street. Why? Had an impact because half of the world's GDP now comes from those emerging nations. Half. There was a time 50 years ago when half of the world's GDP came strictly from the United States. Not too much before that, half the second largest GDP in the world was the Chevrolet Corporation. General Motors was worried that the government was going to split General Motors into two because half of the GDP was coming from Chevrolet. That's the impact. The times, they are a-changing. And they're not just changing in terms of companies getting bigger and stronger. We're seeing the times change. I use the example a lot of times of the phone. And I talked earlier in the program about the computers, a huge computer, maybe 10 foot by 10 foot by 6 foot high. That was the computer. It had a lot of tubes. It had a lot of wiring. Today, I walk around with a phone, called a phone, a smartphone, but that phone has more computing power than that computer that I first worked on. Huge amount of computing power. I remember getting my first calculator. My first calculator was maybe 2 inches high. It was 4 inches wide and maybe 6 inches long. All it did was add, subtract, multiply, and divide. Today, my phone is not just a calculator. It's a supercomputer. It not only has those connections, but it connects to the internet. I can reach people worldwide. I can reach information worldwide. There was a time when the United States had proprietary information, and that gave us a dominance in the world. Today, anybody in the world can get information. The world is flat. The information is readily available to the people in Bangladesh. It's readily available to the people in South Africa. It's readily available to the people in Saudi Arabia. It's readily available to the people in South Korea, North Korea. I mean, the information is available. And we're seeing businesses come. I think that one of the biggest, or maybe the thing that the Obama administration will be remembered for more than anything else, is not healthcare, but the Jobs Act. Passed in 2012, Jobs Act was jumpstart our business startups, the Jobs Act of 2012. And what that did, it permitted crowdfunding. Crowdfunding. There are now over 700 crowdfunding sites worldwide, and people can invest. The average amount invested in a company through crowdfunding is like $1,500. You can invest as little as $100. It's made investments worldwide available. You don't have to be in the United States. You don't have to invest in a company in the United States. You don't have to be in England to invest in a company in England, or in Bangladesh to invest in a company there, or in Vietnam. You can invest through crowdfunding. And companies are raising a lot of money through crowdfunding. The expectation is that they'll raise $15 billion. I think, in my opinion, it's the next venture capital. Back in 1947, there was a former dean of Harvard who put together a group of investors, a family of investors. Prior to that, it had all been angel investing. People would go to a family. Alcoa was started when Hall went to the Mellons and said he had this idea on how to make aluminum, and they gave him $25,000 to start what we now call Alcoa. That was the way funds started. New companies started. But in 1947, something changed because they started with a group of families that put together money, and one of those investments was $70,000 into a company called Digital Equipment. When that came public a few years later, that $70,000 investment turned into $35 million. And the venture capital industry was born. Venture capital today, if you look at Silicon Valley alone, $3 trillion is what venture capital has done. That's the market cap of venture capital finance companies. You look around Seattle and look at what's happened in biotech, in technology, in information technology. Many companies, large companies, were financed by venture capital. But they look at larger companies. The times they are a-changing. Nothing could be more appropriate than that song that you didn't hear on the radio, but we heard here at the fair. The times they are a-changing, because I believe that the next funding round is going to come through crowdfunding, and it's going to make it available to everybody everywhere in the world and in very small quantities. I believe that we're going to see in the next 10 years 1,000 companies that grow 1,000 times over. A $1,000 investment will grow into $1 million. I believe that that's going to be true. There's companies today that don't exist that in 20 years will be part of the Dow. We've seen companies grow so fast and so hard. Think about Microsoft. It took 14 years to go from zero to $1 billion. eBay and Facebook took 7 years to grow from zero to $1 billion. Zynga, although it's fallen on hard times, took 4 years. Uber. You can go down a list of companies, Airbnb, all of those companies that have grown from essentially nothing to $1 billion in sales in just a few years. We're going to see more of that. And that's going to change our life. The times they are changing, they'll continue to change. And that presents investment opportunities if you're really on that side. We are at the fair, the Puyallup Fair, and we're seeing some pirates walk by. Old times, Main Street, old times, corn dogs, ice cream, roller coasters, animals, you name it. We're at the fair, Main Street. A take back at a time time almost hasn't changed much here at the fair, but in the rest of our life, it really has. So stick around. I'm going to finish up in a few minutes. We've got another couple segments to go. Don't go away. We're coming to you from the Puyallup.
About Money with Mike Adams will resume in a moment on Business Radio 1300 KKOL. For more information, click on adamsfinancialconcepts.com.
Creating and maintaining wealth has been the specialty of Adams Financial Concepts for over 20 years. Every portfolio managed by Adams Financial Concepts is customized to fit each particular client's objectives and risk tolerance. The client's interest always comes first in portfolio decisions. Call Mike Adams today at 206-903-1019 or log on to adamsfinancialconcepts.com to check out their AFC performance. They welcome your review. That's adamsfinancialconcepts.com.
Now we return to About Money. There's more information waiting for you at adamsfinancialconcepts.com. Here again is your host, Mike Adams.
Am I on? Oh, I'm on. Surprise, surprise, surprise. Okay. I was waiting for some sort of cue and lead in, but I didn't get the cue. I'm on the radio. So I have to talk to you. The beginning music that started off this show, that started off the last few weeks, is Jump by Van Halen. Van Halen was a band that was huge in the 70s and the 80s. Jump was one of their big songs. I like Jump. I like Van Halen. But there's a story about Van Halen, which I told once before. I think I'll tell it again, because Van Halen, when you have an entertainer coming to a place like the Paramount, and I was chairman of the board of the Paramount for 6 years, when you have them coming to a venue like the Paramount or the Moore, they send a contract ahead of time. And this contract spells out what they need you to do, including what kind of food they like, what kind of food you need to furnish. Van Halen's contract was one of those. It was 53 pages long. Most contracts were 10 and 12 pages long at the time. One of the performers wanted a bucket of ice and a fifth of Jack Daniels. Others wanted a dressing room painted white. There were things, 2 cartons of cigarettes. But the Van Halen contract was 53 pages long. It was like a telephone book. It was detailed and complicated. They had an extravaganza for their show. It was lights and smoke and sound and spectacular kind of show. It was one of the most spectacular shows that went on. And they had 53 pages, and every venue is a little bit different. And so they wanted to be sure that each venue was set up. It required the correct electrical. It required the correct load bearing. It required the right superstructure. But the Van Halen contract was very special in a way that it spelled out the food. Because it spelled out that on even days, what they wanted was lasagna or chicken. And they spelled out the side dishes that they wanted as well. They wanted broccoli. They wanted green beans. They wanted carrots. And on the odd days, they wanted steak or Chinese or one other thing. I can't remember. Maybe it was pizza. And they wanted sides of Brussels sprouts or whatever it was. I can't remember all the details. But those were the things that it spelled out. But it also spelled out one other thing. It spelled out that for snacks, they wanted potato chips, they wanted nuts, they wanted pretzels, and they wanted M&Ms. But there was one thing that said, absolutely no brown M&Ms. Now, when the press got a hold of that, no brown M&Ms. That was part of the contract for Van Halen. No M&M, brown M&Ms. So when the press got a hold of it, they thought these are just spoiled, rotten rock stars. They didn't know whether somebody had had a bad experience with brown M&Ms or whether they just wanted to be spoiled and force some caterer to handpick out brown M&Ms. So the first thing that happened when Van Halen got into town, they would rush to the dressing room and they would check to see if there were brown M&Ms. Now the reality of the story is very, very different from what the press thought and from what most people thought. Because if they found brown M&Ms, they realized that somebody had not read the contract in detail. Now, the Van Halen show was an extravaganza. Lights, electrical, superstructure. And if it was not put together, there was a risk that one of the band members or one of the fans could be injured or even killed. And so it was crucial that everything be done correctly and in detail. And so that was the purpose of the brown M&Ms. If they saw that there were brown M&Ms, they knew that the contract had not been read in detail. You know, for me, that's an illustrated story because most investors don't have a brown M&M part of their contract. They don't really look at what's going on. Especially investors with less than $5 million. When I was growing up in the investment industry, we were taught and we were told to sell the relationship, not the performance. The idea is to make people like you, not to look at the performance. You know, the reality is it's the performance that really counts. The performance are the brown M&Ms. The performance are the detailed contract. The performance is the difference between how you do. Dalbar does a study that in that study, it has compared over 30 years of the individual mutual fund investors and how they've done. And over that period of time, if investors had taken $100,000 30 years ago and invested it, today it'd be worth about $300,000. That's the average mutual fund investor because they switch and they don't follow on. And that's whether they're do it themselves or whether they're listening to a financial advisor. If they had just invested in index funds, that would be well over $1 million. So what they've given up is $700,000 to $900,000 by switching back and forth. That's typical. But the idea is to sell the relationship and not the performance. You know, for me, it's all about performance. For me, I want to beat the market. For my clients don't accept the mediocre. They don't accept average. They want outstanding performance. That's just what they do. That's what they hire me for. But that's the brown M&Ms. I want my clients to have that kind of a contract. I want them to look at what's going on. And it's pretty simple. It's not difficult. It's just taking what did we begin with? How much have we added? How much have we taken out? What have the gains been? And what's the ending value? So, anyway, that's enough of that. We're coming back. We're at the Puyallup Fair, and here we're seeing a great time. If you haven't been to the Puyallup Fair, you should be coming to the Puyallup Fair. This is like America at its best. America with corn dogs, with hot dogs, with gigantic hamburgers, with ice cream, with scones. Of course, the scones from Puyallup. And of course, in the program before, they were doing a survey because a lot of people were preferring the elephant ears to the scones. You should come. Make your own decision. Try the scone, try the elephant ears, see which one you prefer. Aha. So we're getting noise from the fair through the microphone. That's okay too. You're hearing everything that's coming through. So do take some time. The fair closes tomorrow, so you've got the rest of today and we've got tomorrow. Come out. I mean, it's a beautiful day. The sun is shining, the skies are blue, white clouds, and it's not that crowded. It seems as though it's kind of died down a little bit. So maybe a lot of people have gone home and you'll find it's easy to get to. Do plan on taking some time to get here, however. It does take a while in the traffic to get to the fair. So, I want to finish in the next segment by talking about some of the things that people are forecasting about the market and finances, and some of the reasons why they're doing that, because I completely disagree. I believe that we're about to enter, we have entered the greatest bull market of our lifetime. I think we're going to see one of the greatest times we've ever seen. It's going to be the time of creation of wealth, not just in this country, but around the world. It's going to be phenomenal. So that's coming up in the next segment, so be sure and stay with that segment. We're coming on two radio stations, 1590 and 1300. Usually you hear me on Friday afternoons from 3 until 4 on 1300, but today you get lucky enough to hear me on two stations, 1590 and 1300. 1590 Freedom Radio and 1300 Business Radio. And it's all about fair and fair time. If you have a question that you'd like answered on the radio, you can go to Adams Financial Concepts, send me an email, put it on my website, and if you have a question you'd like answered on the radio, I'll answer it on the radio. And by the way, B47 Studios is offering a 15% discount to anyone who wants to use their services. 15% discount. They are masters of motion in media broadcasting. So they'll do paper broadcasting, they'll do print, they'll do video, they'll do what you want to do. 15% discount. All you have to do is mention you heard it on Adams Financial Concepts about money, and that's a discount. That's October and September. I'll be right back after the commercial break. Don't go away. We got one more segment to talk about.
More About Money coming up with Mike Adams on Business Radio 1300 KKOL. For more information, click on adamsfinancialconcepts.com.
Lots of people manage investment portfolios. Just a few can manage a successful portfolio and provide exceedingly great service to their clients. Here's Mike Adams from Adams Financial Concepts.
We believe the price you pay should be based on the performance of your portfolio and the quality of service you receive.
You know, Mike, it seems that a lot of companies subscribe to the one-size-fits-all mentality of investing. Does one size really fit all?
Not with us. Every portfolio that we manage is customized to fit each particular client's objectives and risk tolerance. We place our client's interests first in all portfolio decisions.
If you're looking for a home for your seven-figure plus investment portfolio, call Mike Adams of Adams Financial Concepts, specializing in creating and maintaining wealth for over 20 years. 206-903-1019. That's 206-903-1019. Or log on to adamsfinancialconcepts.com.
About Money continues. Remember the website adamsfinancialconcepts.com. Here's Mike.
So here we are at the Puyallup Fair. People walking by, looking at corn dogs, looking at ice cream. Makes you hungry just watching people walk by. And I did have a corn dog and I did have ice cream, and still watching people walk by with all this food does make you hungry. Here at the Puyallup Fair, if you haven't been to the Puyallup Fair, you need to come to the Puyallup Fair. This is Main Street. This is Americana. This is what America is about. You know, I started to say at the last segment before the commercial break, there are people that are forecasting that times are going to be tough. We've gone through this period of time. 2000, the market started to drop. The dot-coms took the market down from 14,000, and we started this period of time where the market dropped, and then it came back, then it dropped, then it came back, then it dropped, then it came back, then it dropped a whole lot in 2008, and we went through this bear market, 2007, 2008, where we went through a very difficult time, the Great Recession. Not much better than the Great Depression. We experienced that, going through that. And that changed expectations for a lot of people. That changed a lot of people who look forward and they want to prepare. There were people that came into that period of time of the Great Recession thinking that they were prepared for retirement, that they were prepared to send their kids to college. And they suddenly found they weren't prepared for retirement, and for some of them, they lost their job. Some of them lost their house. It was a tough time. And so today, as we hear people setting out and saying that they are going to have a 4% return, a 3% return in equities for the next 10 years, it sounds for many very reasonable. I'll tell you, it's not reasonable at all. We're living in a time where things are changing, and they're changing very, very fast. We're seeing disruption. We're seeing companies rise almost overnight. Think about it. They used to say that a company that had a private market value, before they became public, but before they came public, when they were private, a company with $1 billion valuation was a unicorn. Unicorn because extremely, extremely rare. You just didn't see many unicorn companies, hardly ever. If you saw one, it was something significant. You know what? At the end of last year, there were 107 companies, private companies, that had a valuation of $1 billion or more. That's a time. We're living in a time when we're going to see that, and we're going to see some of those companies come public. If you look back in 1966, when the market first hit 1,000 and it started its climb to 10,000, it was a time when you had companies in 1966 like Anaconda Copper, like Union Carbide, like U.S. Steel, Bethlehem Steel, companies, some of which have disappeared, Eastman Kodak. And Eastman Kodak dominated the film market. They had over 90% of all film that was sold and 85% of all cameras that were sold. They were the first ones that developed digital photography back in 1970. They made digital photography, yet they lost their way. They couldn't see what was happening. By the time they really realized what was happening, it was too late. The company was dying and would declare for bankruptcy. That's the time we live in. We're going to see more companies like that. I mean, back in the 1950s, when my parents were there, it was said what was good for General Motors was good for the United States. Well, in 2008, General Motors declared bankruptcy. How could that be good for the United States? We're seeing a change. You know, I mentioned in the previous segment that while you were listening to commercials, we were listening to music. We're listening to the times they are changing, and the times truly are a-changing. And for those people who think that the times are going to slow down and things are going to go more slowly, I completely disagree. I think we're going to live in a time in which we're going to see returns which are exponential. I asked the question. Let me ask you the question. You, the listener, the question. If you had 1 penny on the first day, and it doubled, the amount doubled every day thereafter. So the first day it was 1 penny, the second day 2 pennies, the third day 4 pennies. How much would you have at the end of 30 days? 1 penny doubling. What would your guess be? Go ahead, take a second, think about it. What would your guess be? 1 penny doubling every day for 30 days. How much would you have at the end of 30 days? 1 penny doubling every day for 30 days. You know, I've had guesses of 100,000. Some say, no, that's too much. No, that's too little. At the end of 30 days, you'd have over $10 million. But half of that would come in the very last day because you doubled from 5 million to 10 million. And 3/4 of that would come in the last 2 days, and 90% of that would come in the last 4 days. So you don't really see that happening. In the beginning, it looks like it's a flat curve. It looks like it's not moving at all. And by the time you realize that you've got an exponential curve, you're well beyond what's called the knee of the curve, when it really turns up. I believe we're living in times of exponential growth. We're living in a time when things look kind of flat and kind of slow, but we're going to start to see a time in which things go up. I started talking 5 years ago about the Dow reaching 100,000, but if we're really living in an exponential time, we're going to see a Dow that goes not to 100,000 but to 200,000. We're going to see a thing that increases rapidly. If you look at the Dow starting from 1900, and if you look at the time periods as it increased from 66 to 400, that's essentially a 7-fold increase. It took 29 years to do that. If you look at the Dow from 1941, when it was back to 100 and it started to increase, it reached 1,000 in 1966. It was a 10-fold increase. 10-fold, not 7-fold, 10-fold in 25 years. Then in 1982, when the Dow was 1,000, it went to 14,000, a 14-fold increase in 18 years. Now we've begun this period of time in which we're seeing an increase. We've seen already a tripling in the Dow, but if we see this Dow climb, it wouldn't surprise me that why I believe we're living in the best, greatest secular bull market of our lifetime. Not a 10.1% increase like we saw in the 1980s and 90s, but closer to 12 or 13%. If you're not prepared for that, you're going to miss that. If you're sitting on the sideline, you're going to miss that. It's a time which can create a tremendous amount of wealth for a tremendous amount of people. You should be involved all the way. If you miss some of these programs, you can hear programs by tuning into Adams Financial Concepts on KKOL 1300. They stream it. And you can also hear these programs on iTunes by tuning them in. We do a podcast. We do a blog. We do e-letters. We try to keep everybody informed. You can find all of that information by checking the website or by going to iTunes and looking for About Money. It's there too. And if you haven't been to the Puyallup Fair, you have one day to get here. One day to be here, to see all that's going on, to see Main Street. And remember us, we're from Wall Street, but Main Street is where it's happening. Come enjoy the corn dogs, come enjoy the ice cream, come enjoy the huge hamburgers, the bubble gum, the photos, the portraits, the ice cream, the radio shows. It's a great time in America. It's a great time to be at the fair. Come see all the displays, come see the animals, come see America at its very best.
You've been listening to About Money with Mike Adams, a registered investment advisor. If you'd like more information about what you heard today, or about Mike's investment philosophy and strategy, or if you want Mike to evaluate your own portfolio, click on AdamsFinancialConcepts.com. That's AdamsFinancialConcepts.com. The information shared on the preceding program was for educational purposes only, and any investment advice given may not be suitable for all investors. Join us again next Friday afternoon at 3 for more About Money with Mike Adams, here on Business Radio 1300 KKOL.
The preceding program was sponsored by Adams Financial Concepts. Creating and maintaining wealth has been the specialty of Adams Financial Concepts for over 20 years. Every portfolio managed by Adams Financial Concepts is customized to fit each particular client's objectives and risk tolerance. The client's interest always comes first in portfolio decisions. Call Mike Adams today at 206-903-1019 or log on to adamsfinancialconcepts.com to check out their AFC performance. They welcome your review. That's adamsfinancialconcepts.com.